Bob is a retired financial professional, and one of his great hobbies is as a photographer. And he has made something like, is it 11 trips? 11 trips to Africa. And you can see the pictures are so alive. You could almost feel like you could reach out and touch them and play with them. He's a marvelous photographer. He has that magical touch with his hand and his camera. And we're going to be able to sit back, relax, and enjoy this program, and let Bob tell us what he's doing, and he has some important commentary and messages to share with us in regard to this hobby of his. So let's give a warm welcome to Bob Greenberg.
Thank you, Mel. A little overstated on the qualifications, but thank you. I gave a talk similar to this about 2 years ago, just before the pandemic. Did any of you attend that? Okay, so I got a fresh audience. That's good, because there's a lot of overlap. So how many of you have been to Africa? Everybody almost. Okay. I'm sorry? You're booked to go. Okay. It's nice that things are started opening up again, isn't it? So as Mel said, I've been 11 times. My hobby is photography and wildlife photography specifically. And Africa really is sort of ground zero for that. I mean, it is just a marvelous place. And those of you who've been, you know, I mean, it is just an amazing experience. The way I've laid this out is our first hour, I'm going to be showing you some pictures, talking about some of the different species and their challenges, what's going on with them from a conservation standpoint, ending up with what's going on to try and fix some of the problems, okay, for the first hour, some of the efforts that are being made to try and address that. The second hour is going to be about traveling to Africa. So, and that's going to be participation, okay? I mean, I have slides and things to talk about, but that's wide open. And by the way, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're all experienced people. Most of you have been there already. If you have comments, throw them out, okay? So, and I'll repeat them as long as I remember. I'll repeat them for the people who are online. So let's jump in here. As I say, I've broken this down by species, so it kind of helps. First off, just so if I can get it to move. Hello. That's nice. It was working a minute ago. There we go. Okay. You had to wake up probably. First off, Africa is a huge continent. It has 1.3 billion people in it. So, you know, certainly not all desert or jungle or what have you. The wildlife is predominantly in these green areas. And just to kind of frame this, we're talking about basically from Kenya, Tanzania, and sort of down through this area here, okay? There are, of course, animals in some of the other areas, but these are the safari destinations typically, and that kind of gives you a sense of what we're talking about. So the green spots are national parks or wildlife preserves, something of that nature. And most of the safari activity is either in East Africa or Southern Africa. So the East Africa countries that you most commonly see are Kenya and Tanzania. Southern, of course, is South Africa, and to a lesser degree, Botswana, and then some of the other countries around here is Zambia and so forth. So as you can see, the green area is a pretty small part of that whole continent. And one of the challenges the animals face is they've lost 90 or 95% of their territories. That's very similar to what happened in Europe, in Asia, and of course in our country. You know, we used to have millions of bison. We no longer have that. Same thing applies. So territory loss or habitat loss is a big deal for this species. So let's start with lions, okay? Lions are everybody's vision when they think of Africa, you know, Simba and the king of the jungle and all that stuff. We have all the musicals on that. I love this shot. The reason I love it, being a photographer, is what she's holding in her mouth is actually the front part of a lens. Okay. So when I show this to photographers, say, gee, I wonder what happened to the photographer. Okay. But anyway, she had a toy. She was just enjoying. And cubs, everybody's favorite. You know, as those of you who've been on safari know, seeing young cubs is pretty different, pretty unusual. You see them, but they're typically a little bit older. The reason being that when the cubs are born, mom separates herself from the pride, hides the cubs until they get old enough, usually about a month or so, and then introduces them to the pride so that all of the mothers or all of the females help to care for it. So lions have a wonderful family structure that's really helpful to their survival, because a typical pride might be anywhere from 5 to 25 animals, most of which are females. And I mean, that's an overstatement, but the adults are females, most of them. And all of the females help to care for all of the cubs. So it's sort of communal. There's typically a male around as well, almost always. And number one duty for the male was to make the babies, okay? And the way that works is the female approaches him, says, hey, baby, come on, let's go. And they will typically spend three or 4 days every 15 minutes busy, okay? Quick story, we were on safari one time in Zimbabwe, I think, or in Zambia. And we kept on seeing the same pair constantly at it, okay? And we were in the vehicle, as all of you know, you're in a truck. And we were in an area with very high reeds on both sides, so you really couldn't see very much. We came around a turn and the driver just jammed on the brakes. And the reason he did was this guy's tail was hanging up. So, and he was busy. So anyway, the males really serve that function, obviously. Their other purpose is to preserve the pride, to defend the pride. They do very little hunting. Occasionally they will help, but most of the time the females do all the hunting. But the male has to fight off their competitors. And that's for a really important reason, because if the male loses and a new male comes and takes the pride over, they typically kill all the babies, okay? Because they want their own genetics to take play. So as the male ages, and typically it's maybe 5 years or so that they're in charge of the pride, and then new ones come in. And so it's a challenge. But needless to say, this communal family arrangement for raising the cubs is really helpful to their survival. Looking at what's going on, we've lost half our lions in the last 25 years. Now, I'm going to touch on some areas, but I have a little bit longer discussion towards the end of this part of the program on why. And there's about 25,000 left. Now, specific to lions there's been a lot of issues. Kind of the unique issues have been the use of lion parts in Oriental medicine. And a lot of the conservation problems, by the way, kind of end up with China and Vietnam. But so Oriental medicine, the use of their parts. Let me leave some of that for later because I have a lot of other points that kind of cross all the boundaries. But needless to say, losing half of our kind of tidal species in 25 years is not a great trend. Cheetahs, everybody's favorite big cat. And by the way, just for reference, there are 3 big cat species: lions, cheetahs, and leopards. Cheetahs, obviously the fastest, you all know that. They're also the weakest of those cats. And it is a very challenging story with cheetahs. And by the way, I mean, they are beautiful. Their beauty is one of the problems because they have been taken for pets. If you go back in history, there used to be loads of cheetahs in the South, in the French chateau areas. They would have cheetahs in Iran and all kinds of other places, Middle East. And one thing I learned this morning was that the vast majority of the cheetahs, of course, are in Africa, but there are 40 left in the hills of Iran. Okay, 40. And the main reason they survive is because nobody knows that. But Middle East, it's very common for them to be taken for pets, for show, things like that. So they have some real challenges. Now, cheetah moms take care of their cubs by themselves. They don't have the support group that the lions do. So what ends up happening is she not only has to take care of them on an ongoing basis, but she has to feed them. And even in the best of circumstances, cheetahs maybe make half their kills, half of the attempts work out. But in the case when they've got cubs, that number goes down, okay? Because the cubs get in the way. As they age, they kind of mock charge. They do all kinds of other stupid things that mess up mom. But they have a real difficult time. It's very common to see cheetahs in high places. It's the old, the joke about friends in high places, monkeys in trees. Well, it's really cheetahs. And the reason they're up there is they have incredible eyesight, and it gives them an opportunity to look for prey, and also, of course, to look out for predators against them. So, we came across this in Kenya. These are two brothers, typically you'll see together, because normally the females are separate. And sometimes the males form what are called coalitions, where there's 2, 3, 4. There was a famous coalition of 5 recently in Kenya that's down to 3 now. But they'll get together, cooperate in order to handle things. But anyway, seeing them up in trees is kind of a thrill. Here's a very successful mom with her 3 cubs. This was in Serengeti. We were just talking about that. And it was really wonderful to see them. One of these cubs came up to our car and leaned up to me and looked right up at me. It was really kind of fun. And as I said, they like to go into higher places. So you very commonly see them on termite mounds. This cheetah was getting ready to go to sleep. It was late evening, or late after, almost evening anyway. First thing is checking around, seeing if this is a safe place. Second was looking for any prey while they're at it, okay? But she ended up bedding down there and going to sleep. Cheetahs are struggling. They're down by 50% in the last 32 years. There's about 7,000 left, which is really a desperate situation. One of the problems is there's only about a 5% survival rate for the cubs. Either mom can't get, natural causes, of course, kill some of them, just sickness or what have you. They struggle getting enough food. Other predators come in and kill them. Pretty common for a lion or for a hyena to come in and kill the cubs. One of the challenges I understand is that they typically will have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 cubs. When they get down to 1, they abandon the cub. At least this is what I'm told. I've never seen it. And the rationale supposedly is that it's just not productive to try and raise one when they have such a high failure rate. And so they go off, try and get pregnant and have some more. The cheetahs are struggling. The other of the big cats, the third one, is the leopards. And leopards, as opposed to cheetahs, they look similar to cheetahs, although they are different. But leopards are extremely strong, where the cheetahs are extremely fast. And so their methods of killing are different, and their lives are different. They typically kill by surprise. They spend a lot of time up in trees. I think, if you see them at all, they're up in trees, okay? This guy, by the way, this is the other one's cub. He's about 2 or 3 years old. And I just thought it was a fun picture because he's just kind of hanging there looking around. But mom, the one on the other side there, I was fortunate enough to see she was dragging this kill that she made, working her way over to a tree, and it was quite heavy. They're extremely strong, but it's still very heavy prey. And what happens, she would drag it a little bit, stop and kind of breathe, and then drag it a little bit more and breathe. And then she took it and climbed up a tree with it, of course. So what happens with their prey is, again, they're worried about other predators coming to get us, specifically hyenas mostly. So what they will do is they will carry their prey up to a tree, get it situated on top of a branch, and then spend their time up there. That's also where they feed their young cubs, by the way. So, if you see leopards, you're doing really well. A lot of times you don't see them. They're around, but you just don't see them. They do live solitary lives. And, you may see, rarely, but occasionally you'll see a mother with a child, with a cub. You almost will never see a male and female together unless they're mating at that point. Quick story on leopards. On our first safari, we were in South Africa. And like a lot of people, we had a list, we wanted to see leopards, we wanted to see cheetahs, whatever. And so the guide, we're driving along looking for leopards, and the guide stops and says, "Oh, there's a leopard." No way in heck could I see it. Okay. And he says, "Oh, right there, look." Couldn't see it. I don't know if anybody else in the truck saw it, but I didn't see it. Okay. He got frustrated. He climbed back to me, put his arm out and said, "Now look right there. You'll see it. Look right down my arm." Okay. So I looked down his arm, and sure enough, there was the butt sticking out under a tree. Okay. And it was, 100 yards away or whatever it was. It was way out there. So that was important for him to get me to see a leopard because that was on my list, right? And P.S. The next day, we're driving along and the birds start alerting, so you know that there's something going on, and he stops the vehicle with the same guide. And I'm looking out this side, looking to see what's going on, and my wife's next to me, and all of a sudden I hear, "Oh my gosh." And there's this leopard walking right by our truck, climbs up in a tree and stares at us, okay? So you never know. I mean, that's the wonder of safaris. You really never know what you're going to run into. It's just wonderful. But anyway, leopards are a challenge. I mean, they're hard to see many times. We don't even know how many there are, okay? So it's really hard to know if they are decreasing. The likelihood is that they are, in fact, decreasing, but we don't know that. One thing I didn't know until I did my homework on this is there are actually 9 species of leopard, only one of which is in Africa. Okay, so there's the snow leopards and some of the other ones that you might hear of. They're out there, but the vast majority of the species are really struggling. Elephants. This happen to be my favorite animals. Okay, when you're on safari, it's very common to see a herd of elephants kind of crossing in front of you or around you. They stay in family groups led by a matriarch. Typically, other than young ones, you don't commonly see males around with them. Occasionally you will, but not commonly. And the matriarch, that we know about their memories, matriarch knows where the food and the water is, and she leads them to make sure that they can survive. In some cases, 20, 30, 40 miles. So it's quite amazing. In areas where they have a lot of elephants, most of the trees are destroyed. So it's pretty easy. You see these decimated fields, and they basically wipe out the area. So in some places where they end up with what they would deem overpopulations, they either cull them, meaning kill them, or move some to another area that needs them. So it's a real challenge because if there are too many elephants, they really do destroy the whole area. This is a case where you've got a young bull and an older one, and he's teaching them how to fight, okay? It's just fun to watch. One thing that is really sort of unique, I guess, with elephants, you have these giant animals and a whole troop of them, maybe 10 or 20 of them, and they'll walk right by your vehicle and you can't hear them if you have your eyes closed. It's just amazing. It really is amazing because of the way their feet are built and so forth. But I mean, it is astonishing how quiet they are. They are much like the lions, all of the females help to raise the babies. It's a very strong support system, really a wonderful situation generally. But we've lost almost 2/3 in the last 10 years. There's 400,000 left, which sounds like a big number, but it's a heck of a lot smaller than the number was before. One of the big challenges is one that you've heard of, which is poaching. And really, poaching has gotten much worse with the increase in wealth in Asia. Okay, as China and Vietnam, other countries have developed, people have money. And when they have money, they want to have, in the case of the elephants, the ivory. So fortunately, I've never seen it, but it's very common, I guess, to have them shot, killed, have the ivory cut off them, you know, their tusks taken off them, and then sold into Asia. So that's on top of any of the other issues, habitat loss, some of the other things, but specific to them, it's their ivory, which has such huge value that we have this poaching going on. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. Giraffes. Giraffes in groups are called a tower of giraffes. Okay. And by the way, I don't know who in the heck makes all these names up for the groups, because every single animal has a different name and I can't keep up with them. I don't know what they are. Okay. I'm sorry. So anyway, this is a tower of giraffes. It's very common to see maybe 4 or 5 together. We've seen as many as 50 together, which was just astonishing. But more commonly, you see a small group like this. I particularly like this 3-headed one. Don't know how it came that way, but what the heck, okay? Giraffes obviously are the tallest animal. You know the story on all this. But what's fun, I think, to watch on safari is you'll have males that do what they call necking, which is basically that their heads will get knocked together and they're breaking each other, trying to break each other's legs and what have you. Most of the time that's just play, but occasionally it's not. And they can be lethal. Okay, they can actually kill each other or one or the other. And so if you're ever on safari and you see that, stop and watch, because it's quite a deal. But anyway, as those of you who've been, I mean, pretty much everybody's been to Africa, you have these beautiful sunsets, silhouettes of animals. I mean, it's just marvelous. So there are 4 different species of giraffe in Africa. There's the, and I can't get through them all. There's the Maasai, there's the reticulated, a couple of others I've forgotten. But anyway, they're born 6 feet tall. So imagine now, and don't forget, they're tall to begin. I mean, the parents are tall, the mother is tall. So, mom is about this high when the baby comes out. You have a 6-foot animal come flying out of there or falling out of there and, landing on the ground and then immediately getting up and rickety, but getting up and needing to move, because if they don't, they're going to be prey. So pretty wild. They've done better than some of the other animals. There's a 30% loss in 30 years. So, the trends, even with the stronger species, are not wonderful. Primates. There are loads of different kinds. These happen to be vervet monkeys. Those of you who've been on safari, you've ever had a vervet monkey experience? Okay, these guys are thieves. They will get into your room or your tent or whatever and steal whatever they can. And in fact, on our last safari, we usually go into tented safaris. Last safari, they told us not only to close the zippers, but to use a padlock on the zippers, because they had learned how to open it. Okay. So, I mean, they're little thieves. Okay. But they're wonderful to watch. And I mean, primates obviously are very similar to us genetically and everything else. They do this bonding exercise where they groom each other, and it's just really fun to watch. There are many different kinds. Just a couple here. The one on your left is the golden monkey. They're in Rwanda. They're close to the area where the gorillas are, and we'll talk about them in a minute. The other one is a blue monkey, and they are cousins. You can see they're very close. Just really beautiful animals. And baboons. Okay. The group of baboons is called, anybody know? A troop, okay? Don't ask me. So it's very common on safari to run into large groups of these or large troops. And we were in Lake Manyara, and they are the traffic jam. You know, there's about 300 of them there on the road and you can't get by. And you wouldn't want to, frankly, you want to watch them. They're very fun to watch, you know, get the babies tumbling and all the other stuff going on. And it's just really a kick to watch them. But in areas where there are close to civilization, if you will, like, for example, Victoria Falls, where there's a fairly good sized town, they're really a nuisance. They've learned that if somebody's carrying a bag, there's food in it. And if you look at those teeth, you don't want to mess with them. Okay. So the people who live in that area really struggle. They have a really hard time with the baboons. And there's just not a lot they can do about it, frankly. So there are over 200 different species in Africa, but half of them are in Madagascar. Okay. 60% of those species are threatened with extinction, and 75% are declining in population. Now, some of them have done a really good job of integrating into human society, if you will. You know, you see the pictures in India where they're living in the cities and all that stuff. And to some degree, you have that in Africa as well. But like everything else, they're declining. Mountain gorillas. Has anybody done a gorilla trek? You have, okay. So have I. What'd you think of it?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, they come within 5 feet of you, and you aren't supposed to get closer, but they can run right by you, and you can't move fast. They're very, very friendly. They don't. The guides up there won't introduce humans to the group unless they've cleared it with they usually go up every day for about 6 months and get them very accustomed to humans, so that once you take a trek, they know that they're safe. And you, even though they take guns with them, they don't pay any attention to you. Even the big mountain one, the dad with the gray,
Right.
yeah,
Silverbacks, yeah.
Silverbacks, yeah. They're just, the babies are just the most adorable.
Yes. So just to touch on this, as long as we're talking about it, the process is all the tourists kind of come together in one central area. And this is in Rwanda. I think they do the same in Uganda, which are the only two places that do this. Okay. So they bring you to the central area and they sort you out according to how well they think you can hike. Okay. And I was in with the old folks, fortunately. So, and they have trackers out that are looking for these families. And so they have, and radios and everything. So they kind of know where they are. And so your chances of seeing them are very high. But of course, these animals move. And so, it might only be an hour trek when you start out. It might be 3 hours by the time you catch them. But anyway, I had a good friend of mine who went to Uganda. And he, for whatever reason, was put in with the stronger folks. And he had an 8-hour trek in the mud, climbing up through, a horrible, horrible experience. He loved the experience of an hour. You get to spend 1 hour with them, by the way. He loved the experience of having an hour with them. And then, of course, trekking down through the mud for another number of hours to get there, finally, to get back to his hotel. And as they're coming up to the hotel, on the lawn is a family of gorillas. I won't use the words he used, okay? But anyway, for us, we went twice. In both cases, it was about maybe a 1 to 3 hour trek. And it can be a little bit challenging, but it was absolutely worth it. You get to spend an hour with these animals, which is amazing.
So when we went, it only cost $800, and a month after we left, it's now $1,500
Right.
for 1 hour.
Yeah. And I'll be touching on that. In fact, before I go there, let me just to kind of tag on with what you said. This is the big silverback, obviously, there. And you definitely don't mess with them, but they don't bother you. They're fine. This young one was running around. He's swinging from vines. He's twisting. He's just, having a wild old time. And I was taking a picture this way. He came up behind me and swatted me on the butt. And, you're not supposed to say anything or yell. Well, needless to say, I did. Okay. So he just wanted to go by. He was just in a hurry. So anyway, and as you said, I mean, we're told to stay 10 or 15 feet, whatever it is, away. They don't care. They're going to do what they're going to do. Okay. But what's going on here is actually a success story. In 1981, there were about 250 left. Now there are over 1,000. And it's because of the way that this has been done. The countries, which is Uganda and Rwanda primarily, have taken on this idea of gorilla tracks, institutionalized it. They charge a lot of money, but that money is used to take care of the animals. And so what happens is the $1,500, or it was $750 when I did it, but I know it went up to $1,500, is used to hire the rangers, to provide medical care, to do whatever's necessary to keep the animals going. And it really has paid off. Okay. I mean, needless to say, 1,000 is not a large number, but it's a heck of a lot better than 250. So even though it's kind of grudging to pay that kind of money, it's really for good purpose. And as we'll talk about later, the only successful, well, most of the successful conservation efforts involve the local people as well. And this is this case where by having gorilla trekking, the people are hired. They're no longer incented to be a poacher. Instead, they're paid to carry things for you or to do other things, work in the hotels, do whatever it is that's necessary. So that really is a great success story. Zebras. As far as I know, they do, every single one is different. Okay. Somebody asked, are they like fingerprints? I think they are. Okay. I've never tried to measure it and figure it out, but I'm told they are. Zebras, you see them quite commonly on the plains areas, and they are part of the Great Migration. People think of wildebeest, that huge migration of millions of animals. The vast majority of them are wildebeest, or gnus, as they call them. But, excuse me, there's about 300,000 zebras as well that make that migration every year. They are very much like horses. I mean, they have foals. I mean, the words are the same for those of you who know anything about horses, which I don't. But basically, wonderful animals. It is common when I don't have a picture of this, but it's very common when you see a group of them facing both directions. One's looking this way, one's looking that way, because they want to look out for predators. Okay, so that's a kind of a very common scenario. These are, the ones you just saw are called plains zebras. These are Grevy's zebras. These are in the northern area of Kenya. And I think more beautiful, frankly, just smaller, finer lines and things, but they're gorgeous animals. So there are 11 different species of zebra in Africa. The plains zebras, which are the ones that we normally think about, the ones that you see most commonly, they're in near threatened status. The Grevy's, like I just showed you, there are only 3,000 left. They're down 80% from the 1970s and 50 years. So needless to say, a real challenge. I think I read, and I'm not certain of this, but I think I read that there are some Grevy's at the San Diego Wild Animal Park that they're trying to save, but I'm not sure of that. All right, birds. When I gave this talk last time, someone spoke out who'd been to Africa a number of times, spoke out and said, when you go there, you're thinking about cats and all of these other animals that you're interested in. But a lot of times you don't see them. It's really great to look at the birds. There's some wonderful birds out there. And so whether you're a birder or not, I'm just going to share some of the birds that are out there. And by the way, to finish that, 2,700 species, okay? So here's two of them. The Quarry bustard on that side is, that was kind of fun because this is a male all prumped up and trying to show off for the females, okay? I had never seen that. It was the one time I saw it. And they're just really, really neat to see. And they walk around, kind of strut around and show off. It's about maybe 3-4 feet. It's a pretty good sized bird. This is a bird that everybody who's been to Africa remembers, the lilac-breasted roller, and just beautiful colors. There's also a European roller that migrates back and forth. It looks kind of similar, more green, but beautiful. These are the bee eaters. There's a variety of them. Quick story. We were in Zimbabwe, and we're driving along in the truck, and these guys were just flying all around us, and I just didn't understand what was going on. Well, I found out they're smart enough to know that when the truck goes by, all the insects get kicked up. Okay, so they're after all, they're flying around trying to catch all the insects. So smart animals. Anyway, so they're somewhat adapted to human life, I guess. There are many different types of predator birds. This is a tawny eagle. There are a number of others, but beautiful animals. This is a bird you see fairly commonly on the plains called a secretary bird. It's about maybe 2.5, 3 feet tall. And you'll see it just kind of walking around and looking for snakes. Okay. So they're really, really fun to watch. So about 1/6 of the bird species are in danger of extinction. And by the way, even in North America, we have a big problem with birds. Okay. And most of these birds that are subject to extinction are from Africa alone, meaning you don't find them anywhere else. So let's talk about what's going on and why some of these numbers are the way they are. Sort of the main challenge or the biggest challenge is habitat loss. You know, if they don't have room to spread out, it's just not going to work. They don't have enough prey, they don't have enough territory, on and on and on, whatever the species might be. And it's just the growth of the human population that squeezed them out. So fortunately, we do have these national parks and wildlife areas that are set aside. I hope they continue. It's a wonderful thing that we've done. We, the species, I'm not taking credit for any of that, have done, because at least there's a place for them. But their habitat loss in Africa is probably 95%. So it's a real challenge. Poaching. There are three primary targets: elephant, rhino, and pangolin. Okay, the elephants we've touched on, the ivory being sent over to China primarily because of, you know, artistic needs, if you will, carving, things like that. And it is, it's a very profitable business. It's a real problem. Rhinos are on their way, depending on the species, there are some different species, are on their way to extinction. And what's happening is the rhinos have their horns, which are made out of the same thing as your fingernails are, keratin. But allegedly they have medicinal properties in Asian medicine. And so they're being killed for their horns. And it's a significant challenge. I mean, some of the species are now extinct or are virtually extinct. Just a side note, in Kenya, there's an area called Old Pajeta where they have a reserve for rhino. And there was the last survivor of the northern white rhino was there. And they were trying to find a way to reinvigorate the species. I think I read that in San Diego, they actually did it. Okay.
I was just there.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
And am I correct?
Yeah, they have. What they see on Monday, there were 3 white rhinos, 2 black, and then there was another species, but they have been able to have babies.
Yeah, through artificial insemination into another species. Yeah. So anyway, so that's really, really something. And then the last one I had on the list is this pangolin. I mean, this is sort of a mythical species for people who go to Africa a lot. You know, the guide says, what do you want to see? You say, well, I want to see a pangolin, and they laugh. Okay. Pangolin looks like a little armadillo. Okay. I've never seen one. But they, like an armadillo, they have like scales on the side. And again, Oriental medicine thinks there's a use for those. I was told that something like 2 million a year are sent over to Asia. So it's a big challenge. Poaching, by the way, sort of the way we think of it typically, the layperson thinks of it, is, a poor local goes out and shoots one to get some money. And to some degree, that's true. But it is very much like the drug trade. You have cartels, very sophisticated, very wealthy, that are very organized, very well equipped, that go out and cause the massacres. And there was a case in Tanzania. There was a Chinese woman, and I don't know if she was native to China or native to Tanzania, who was arrested being kind of the kingpin of one of these cartels. But it's a very sophisticated operation. So countering that is a real challenge, because you have nonprofit organizations and local governments that are really not as well funded. And so if you go to the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, for example, they have a plaque on the wall there of a whole bunch of different rangers that have been killed. So it's a war. Now, fortunately, you never see it when you're on safari. You'll never run into it. I mean, it's not something that's in front of you at all, but it's going on. Yeah.
Sir, could you address, I very much could be in error, but are the penguins pets, exotic pets? And also, would you have a comment of what's happening of making these exotic pets? I just saw a thing on YouTube. Is that involved at all?
I don't have the answer for you there. I don't want to claim to be an expert on that. It's possible, I guess. But I mean, what I heard was Oriental medicine. So I don't know. When there's as much money as there is in poaching, that immediately leads to corruption. And that's one of the big challenges. And by the way, these countries have their own corruption problems anyway. But when you've got huge amounts of money flowing, it's pretty easy to buy off the officials or buy off the police or whatever it is and avoid prosecution or being arrested or anything like that. And so corruption is a major problem. Some of the countries are better than others, but it's a big deal regardless. Then there are climate issues. East Africa right now is going through a drought. And I mean, it's a pretty severe one. And so when there's a drought, animals die as well as people. So, I mean, it's a real challenge for them. I'm certainly not expert on climate change or anything, although things are changing there. I mean, it is noticeable that the climate is changing and some of the cycles of things happening are happening at different times, things like that. But, there's smarter people than I am about that area. One of the things we don't think about is that when the prey species are lost, the predators are lost. Okay, so, if the climate changes and, for example, the grasses don't grow, then the antelope of various types don't survive, and then the predators don't survive because they have nothing to eat. So there's this interlinking of all the different species that happens out there. One of the big issues is poverty. In most of these countries that we've talked about, the vast majority of the people live, and I mean, big number, depending on the country, the vast majority of them live on less than $5 a day. And most of them, with the exception of a few, most of them live in rural communities. And so that creates a whole set of problems. If you're a farmer and your livelihood, I mean, literally your livelihood is in the ground in front of you in your little plot that you've grown, and elephants come through and wipe out your survival, it's not a very good thing for the people. And it sure as hell isn't a good thing for the elephants because they're going to get killed. If you are raising cattle and cats come in and kill them, they're going to go kill the cats. So poverty is a real challenge. And then, of course, the issues of corruption and the other things that we've talked about, the fact that a lot of these people are living in areas where there is going to be an interface with the animals. If you're living in Nairobi or you're living in some big city, you probably won't You might, but you're probably not going to see them. We did have a mountain lion here in Irvine, but commonly you won't see them. And so when they're living in rural communities, they do see the animals. And by the way, it always astonished me, you know, you have these really young children in elementary school walking through the national parks to go to school. And there's lions and everything around. They do it, okay? So somehow or another, they've learned. I haven't been trained, I don't know, but they are able to do it. And usually you see them walking maybe with a teenager or something, but they do that all the time. And so there's definitely an overlap here, or an interface between the people and the animals, which is why when we're trying to conserve the animals, we need to deal with the people as well. So let me just talk about what's going on in the way of conservation. There is an international agreement called CITES, and I don't remember what it stands for, which basically is to stop the trade in endangered species. And like most international agreements, I think it has a mixed success rate, but at least there is an effort there to try and prevent some of this from going on. You have local government efforts. So for example, in Kenya, they have changed their rules. So if the rangers are out there and they find poachers, they can kill them. Okay, it's pretty severe. I've been told that that did not help, but they're trying anyway. So local governments, particularly those areas that have tourism, really want to preserve the animals. Okay, so they're trying. You have local charities. In Zimbabwe, we were taken to a place where there was what they called a wildlife trust. It's a little tiny office, 2 veterinarians, a couple helpers, and they were trying to save the animals. They were teaching the locals, you know, the value of the animals. They were taking care of their own pets and everything. They actually hand-raised a cheetah there, which was incredible. I won't get into a long story there, but anyway, it is very much in, you know, right at the local level that a lot of this work is getting done. Oh, by the way, that place we went, I mentioned that we were from California, and they said, "Oh, do you know anything about San Diego?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I've been there." "You've been to the zoo there? Really?" And it was a huge deal for them because San Diego Global, Zoo Global, is one of the big funders. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Major charities, there's a ton of them. Okay, World Wildlife Fund, Conservation International, the Jane Goodall Institute for Chimpanzees, International Rhino Foundation, Cheetah Conservation Funds, loads of others. And these organizations function in either one or two ways. Either they're just funding the local groups, meaning they're primarily fundraisers, and or they have their own operations on the ground. And you know, a lot of them are working in anti-poaching activities, things like that. So there's a lot going on with these major charities, and it's many millions of dollars. I mean, it's a big number. The major zoos. Frankfurt Zoo is very active. San Diego Zoo Global, I mentioned. Columbus Zoo, the Bronx Zoo, lots of others. And the zoos, not all of them, but the major ones are really involved in conservation 2 ways. One is by funding the local operations in Africa or wherever. Secondarily, trying to raise the endangered species. You know, in some cases, there's just a few left, as we were just talking about before. They're doing their best to raise those species and hopefully at some point be able to reintroduce them in the wild. Okay, yes?
If you haven't been to the San Diego Safari Park, it is well worth going. I've lived here forever, and I just went on Monday. I thought I'd gone before, but they had, you know, they had 2 just newly born giraffes. Actually, they have 3 youngsters. They've been doing a lot with reproduction of the animals and taking them back into the wild. Yeah. And it's quite, and they have, it's 1,800 acres. Yeah. So it's huge. Yeah. And they've done really marvelous.
They have, yeah.
highly encourage.
I agree. Yeah, we've been there a number of times. It's a great place. So anyway, the major zoos are major players here. A big thing that we all can get involved and have gotten involved with is ecotourism. Now, the number one thing that we do when we go there is we bring money. So we're definitely helping local communities. We're providing jobs. In many cases, the camps or hotels, lodges, whatever it might be, are involved in the local communities. You know, they're hiring the people there, but they're also helping to fund the education, maybe providing medical care, doing other things to help the local communities, which is a big deal. Some of them are funding anti-poaching activities. So that's an important effort. In Kenya, they have a program called Private Conservancies. And what they're doing there is, these are areas very close to, attached to the Masai Mara Reserve, right next to that. And basically what they've done is the territories are owned by Maasai groups, and they have a lease arrangement with safari operators. So they allow a limited number of camps to be built. Those safari operators hire the local people, of course, and the money from the lease goes to support the local people. And as part of that, the Maasai agree not to graze all their cattle in ways that would hurt the local wildlife. So it's a really wonderful kind of a program. Lots of other efforts going on there. So let's take a break. I think I timed that just about right. Why don't we come back about 5 after? The restrooms are across the street if you need them. Take a break, and then we'll talk about being on safari. Okay? So let's talk about going on safari. Oh, yes. So just a quick thing, my wife and a guide who we became very friendly with. We've been to his house and everything. So that's one of the nice things about this kind of stuff. But being on safari is fun, obviously. And here we go. Okay, there it is. All right. Camps versus lodges. When you go there, there are two basic approaches. Okay, there are camps which are generally tented, and then there are lodges which are more significant structures, I guess is the easiest way to say that. There's pluses and minuses. You know, when you're in a lodge, you have essentially a hotel. You may have air conditioning. I mean, you've got all the luxuries. And in a camp, the advantage to the camps, in my view, is you're much closer to the wildlife. You're really in nature as opposed to being in a hotel. But different approaches for everybody. So, oops, boy, camp styles. Camps, they can be really luxurious. They can be really basic. Okay, so you do get what you paid for generally. Camps typically will have some kind of common areas. The mid-range and higher will have an eating area that can be fairly significant. They may, and many of them have, most of them have bars and maybe a reading area or, you know, a kind of a gathering place. Here's a situation with the elephant. I mean, you are close to nature, okay? Lodges are more significant structures, okay? Lodges can be very nice, or they can be more mid-range, or basically, you know, more basic, just depending on what you want. The one where you're seeing the people eating at the buffet, in 2008, we took our family to Africa, grown kids, no youngsters. And we were there for Christmas. And that was the Serena Lodge in the Serengeti. It was the most magnificent Christmas we ever had. I mean, they had local church people come and sing. I mean, it was just really a wonderful deal. Actually, it was extra fun. But I mean, they had a fashion show, and they asked everybody, all the women in there to put on the clothes. And so my wife was dressed up like a Muslim and all these other things. And everybody was just having a great time. So anyway, really two different approaches. And you can mix and match, obviously, if you want. So what's it like being on safari? Daily activities, you're up something like 5:30 in the morning. And it's pretty typical. They'll bring you some coffee or tea, maybe some biscuits or something, because you're going to roll out at 6. And And these numbers, I mean, obviously each place is a little different and every situation is a little different, but ballpark. You're up and you're on a game drive, probably from 6 until 9, something like that. You'll have breakfast sometime after that, and it may be in the bush. You know, they may bring breakfast with you and you eat it out there, or it may be back in the camp. Lunch sometime around noon. And then you've got a couple hours to just take it easy. And you're getting up early, so you may want to take a nap. Depending on when you go and where you are, it might be really hot. You may not feel like doing anything. So it's a good chance to just take it easy. And then you have an afternoon drive, typically from 3 to 6 or something like that. And by the way, the reasons for the early and late drives is that's when the animals are out. Okay. If you go in the middle of the day, it's hot and the animals are smart enough not to be out there. So, you know, if the dumb people want to go, that's fine, but they don't want to go. So that's right. Okay. So it's very common to have what they call a sundowner in the bush, where you're driving along and it's getting a little bit late and they'll find some scenic spot, pull over to the side, set up tables, and then feed you wine or beer or gin and tonics, whatever it is, which is really a beautiful, beautiful experience. Dinner around 7 or so, and then night-night. Safari vehicles. Okay. It is the most common vehicles are either a closed vehicle like this one on this side or an open vehicle like the one over there. In the least expensive safaris, they use minivans. It's not something I recommend, but you'll see them occasionally there. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Okay. If you're in an area like northern Tanzania, you're going to be driving between different locations on very dusty and dirty roads. And so having a closed vehicle really makes a lot of sense. If you're in, say, the Masai Mara or something, it's nowhere near as dusty. Open vehicles make sense because you're a lot closer to the animals. Okay. And again, I mean, you see open or closed in both places. There's a matter of taste or opinion on these things. For me, I like being with nature, so I like the open vehicles. But if I'm going someplace where there's a lot of dust and a lot of driving, I'd rather have the closed ones. Okay.
Insects or.
Could be insects too, yeah. Yeah, but typically, even in the open ones, they've got the pop-up up. And so insects still come in, okay? But I mean, quite honestly, I mean, most of you have been there. I mean, it's really not a big deal depending on where you are and when you're there. You know, we do take malaria pills. We don't want to take a chance, but really, we've never been bothered. I mean, we had one occasion where we had what are called tsetse flies, which bite like hell. They're painful, but it was once out of, you know, many, many situations. And it's just certain locations where you might have that. But bugs are really not an issue generally. And by the way, in the camps or in the lodges, they have mosquito nets around the beds. So you're quite safe. In between, you may fly or you may drive, depending on where you are. If you're flying, they're commercial operations. I mean, we've been in 737s between camps. We've been in planes like that. And sometimes they're smaller, but they're commercial operations, so they're very safe. We had one out of all the many flights we've taken that was a little sketchy. In Zimbabwe, we had kind of a rickety little 6-seat Cessna, 2 guys, the pilot and the co-pilot. Nice people. They're using their cell phone for GPS. We made a stop, which I had no idea we were going to, in the middle of Lake Kariba. There was a little island there to pick up some people. And a couple guys with AK-47s came up and I'm like, oh my God, you know, what are we doing here? Turns out they were friends. Okay. They were friends of the pilots. But anyway, that was the only time. Most of the time you're in these kinds of planes, they're very fine. It's absolutely no problems. The advantage obviously is you get there faster and it's more convenient. The disadvantage is you really don't see what's around you. You know, you're flying over the area and you don't see what's in between. So driving has its advantage because you do see the towns, you see the people, you see how they live. And this is kind of a typical East Africa town. You know, it's interesting to see. game drives. It's where all the fun is. I know all the fun, but a lot of the fun. As most of you know, you never really know what you're going to see. You know, you aim towards something, you know, the drivers all communicate by radio and they say, oh, there's a lion sighting or whatever, and they go chase after it. But you never really know what you're going to see. The lion picture there, we were driving along in Zimbabwe in Hwangi National Park, and it's really a dead day. There was nothing going on. And we came around a turn and the female was lying in the road. Okay, so obviously you stop. And then a few minutes later, the male comes out and greets her. And we're stopped and watching them. And then we had a spotter behind me, taps me on the shoulder, says, look behind you. Look behind you, there's 3 more females behind us. And then these 2 came and walked around, went to the others. I mean, it was just wonderful. And we were right in the midst of all this stuff. So you never really know what you're going to have. You do obviously see kills. I mean, that's how these animals live. This is a hyena there. If you're in an area like Ngorongoro Crater, they're very habituated. They are very used to seeing these vehicles. And lions will go right next to you. I mean, it's hot. They'll lie down in the shade of the car. You can't move. Okay, so we had one case where we were driving along. We saw a rhino off in the distance, so we stopped. And there was a lioness under a tree, you know, from here to the wall. And she thought our shade was better, so she came and walked under our vehicle. Okay, and our guide saying, well, you know, we got to move. And so he slowly pulled ahead, and of course she got up and came under the vehicle again. So you never know. They're not particularly afraid in most cases. They're quite used to this. You come across these scenes like this cheetah in the flowers, which is just beautiful. You see situations like this, the leopard at the bottom here. Now, she was quite used to having vehicles around, but really that's a problem. I was reading this morning that with cheetahs in particular, that particular study, in the areas where there's heavy concentrations of tourist vehicles like this, you know, we'll have 5 or 10 or 20 vehicles at a time around a sighting. They tend not to have their cubs survive because when the vehicles are around, she can't see if any predators are around. She can't go hunting. She can't protect her cubs. It's a real mess. And so we're loving a lot of these animals to death. Now, some of the areas have restrictions, no more than 3 vehicles or 5 vehicles, whatever it is. They're not always enforced, but it really should be in place. I mean, it's really a necessity. You know, in those areas where they are enforced, you'll have maybe 3 vehicles in a maximum of maybe 15 minutes or something. And you'll see somebody waiting, you know, at a distance. And when somebody pulls off, the next one comes in. So that's a better way to go. But anyway, seeing these animals obviously is the reason most of us go. This was a sundowner up there. That's the Mara River. And he's setting up a table for our drinks. And it's just really, really fun to do. From that same spot, we saw this tower of giraffe, and they were crossing the Mara, and it was just wonderful to watch that. This bottom one is the area in Kenya where they were protecting the rhino. It's called Old Pajeta, and these are rangers. And so you get to see that in play. Now, they don't normally have 4 of them standing around one rhino, but I think they were coming in for dinner or something. But anyway, we happened to see them all there. This one is worth a little bit of discussion. We had 3 cheetahs find this leopard in a tree, and neither one wanted the other one there. So we had probably 20 minutes of mock charges going back and forth between them, screaming, yelling, all this other stuff. We thought certainly somebody was going to get killed, but fortunately nobody did. And it was all just threatening, but you know, no actual contact. It was wild. It was really wild to see. But more commonly, you find your lion sleeping, okay? They sleep 22 hours a day, so your chances of finding them sleeping are pretty good. And it's pretty common to see them just racked out. They're just gone, okay? They don't care what you're doing. And then the skies in Africa are just gorgeous. I don't have any pictures of it, but the night sky where you've got just the incredible constellations of stars are just amazing. But you get these beautiful sunsets and sunrises with the animals silhouetted. You have optional activities. Okay, in the Masai Mara, I think it's the only place you have a choice. You pay extra for them. You have a choice of going up on a balloon safari. And if you have a chance to do it, it's worth doing. They're not cheap. It's like $500, I think, still. But what they do is they take you out at a kind of a low level and you're flying over the Masai Mara, and then they land and they give you breakfast as a group. And it's just really a neat experience because it's a very different view than what you'd have otherwise. You may get a chance to go to Maasai communities, excuse me. And typically they're a little touristy. They're trying to sell their jewelry that they make and so forth. But you really do get a chance to see how they live. And it's wonderful. It was kind of fun, by the way. This little boy, my son-in-law was with us, and he's 6'4", and they all called him Schwarzenegger, which was funny. But anyway, he wanted to grab onto my son-in-law, so he carried him around for a while. It was just so cute. But anyway, it was funny because he sent a message to his mom, said, "Oh, we brought another baby home." But anyway, and this was at that little wildlife trust I mentioned. They were actually taking care of elephants, and we got a chance to go in and feed them. Okay, so these kinds of things are fun to do. I mean, they're not obviously the core of why you're there, but they are fun to do when you have a chance. And then you've got the evening skies or the morning skies. They're just so spectacular. I mean, there is nothing to compare. And I mean, this particular one, that's rain clouds over there in the distance. But I mean, it is hard to overstate just how beautiful it is. So we have time. Why don't we share some tips? I know you told me that I think that you went with OAT. Somebody did. I forgot. I'm sorry. You did. Okay. I don't have my glasses on. Anyway, certainly I've heard very good things about that as a group. How have other people gone? Have you gone individually? Have you gone with a group? How have you done that?
Who wants to talk?
Nobody. Yes. Okay.
And it was, a wonderful experience. This brings tears to my eyes, remembering what that looks like.
Yeah.
We have people on Zoom. They need to hear what we're saying.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
And I forgot to. Thank you. Yeah.
But they, it's an experience like no other.
It really is. You have a comment? Go ahead.
So my sister-in-law was born and raised in South Africa. My brother married a South African. Her grandfather was a Dutch consulate originally. So she was going to go with my brother and her daughters, my nieces. And so we tagged along, and she booked everything, showed us the homeland. And we went to Kruger National Forest, stayed at Nyala Nagaya Lodge, and it was really spectacular. But she also took us to Cape Town, and she took us to some of the countryside, and we visited her sister too. So
nice.
She gave us the lowdown on the South African culture as well, since she was born and raised there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you have braai?
Yes, we
Of course.
did have braai.
Barbecue.
We had another lady years ago came in, and she had just gone on safari.
Yes.
She said there's a good time of year because she got hundreds of pictures of birds. And luckily she was with somebody who was identifying those birds. But she said there's a better time because during their summer, when there's not as heavily brushed, so you can see the animals in the trees. And so what time of the year is that?
Depends on where. Southern Africa is a little different cycle than East Africa. remember their opposite cycle. So our summer is their winter and vice versa. Kind of the most popular time is their winter or our summer. So July or August, and it's a brown time. Basically the leaves die off and so forth. And so it's easier to see the animals or what have you. I happen to like the green times. And so we tend to go on the shoulders in, just a month or two before the hot times come, but you may have a little rain. So it just depends on what you want.
Oh, it's May.
It depends on where.
South Africa or East Africa.
East Africa. You may have some rain, but I mean, typically it's not a big deal. Now, again, the times are changing because of climate change. I don't want to tell you for sure what would happen there. I'm going in June. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just like any weatherman. Yeah, right. Can't tell you what tomorrow is, but, or even today is raining and they're saying it's not, but that is kind of borderline. Okay. You may have more rain than you want, but you may not. But it should be very green, which is beautiful. And you still see a lot of animals. Yeah. Yes.
What about the crocodile? Are there any left?
Crocodiles, yes, there are.
That was the most vicious animal I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah,
Have you lived there with, have you seen them?
I have seen, yes. The question was, what about crocodiles? Are they still around? And the answer is yes. I don't know what the numbers are, but yes, we've definitely seen them. And of course, that's famous for the migration crossing, when all the wildebeest and zebras cross the Mara River in the migration, and you have all the crocodiles there waiting for them. It's quite an event. By the way, just touching on that, we went in northern Tanzania, the other side of the river, basically from that, and we spent 3 mornings, like 4 hours at a crack, and together with about 50 other cars. And every time the herd would come up to the edge, look down and say, I don't think so. And then they'd turn around and go back. And then they'd come back again. I don't think so. And they'd keep doing this, and every time we're just ready for them to go. And they're herd animals. They follow the leader. Okay. So finally one of them jumps in, and of course, then they all go. But, and the challenge then is you have all these 50 cars that are backed off from the river waiting. As soon as the first one goes, those cars, it's a demolition derby. I mean, everybody's just charges up to the edge, and God help anybody that's in the way. I mean, it's crazy. So, but it's quite an event. It is quite an event, but I mean, you never know when they're going to go. Other comments?
There is a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is a question from one of our Zoom viewers. And the question is, why not send them to a zoo instead of killing them?
Which them are they talking about?
I'm not sure what animal they're talking about.
I'm not either.
That was for the elephant.
Oh, the culling? Okay, so maybe it's the elephants that they're talking about.
Yes.
I mean, they generally, they try and relocate them if they can, and they'll move into some other country or some other place that doesn't have enough, or consider that they don't have enough. Sending an elephant to a zoo, if it is a big deal. I mean, it's a very costly major effort. And so relocating a whole herd or something would be a big, major undertaking. It does happen. I ran into one fellow that actually owned a small zoo in Kansas or someplace. And he was in the process of moving I think it was a rhino. And it was, several $100,000 or something to move it. I don't remember what the number was. It's a big deal. So relocating a whole herd or something would be very tough.
The same person asked another question, not a question, it's just a comment. And she says, the pangolin looks like a cross of an anteater and armadillo.
Okay. I'll believe her
Yeah.
or him. I mean, I've never seen one. I've been told that it was like an armadillo.
Oh,
But-
I see.
I don't know.
They may be related.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Here.
We were watching the rhinos in the water, and all of a sudden they started coming our way. I've never seen a bus back up so fast.
Rhino or hippos?
Hippos.
Oh, hippos,
Yeah,
okay,
hippos.
yeah.
Yeah. I never seen, I mean, this guy was gone. It's like, oh no, because he was afraid. He
Yeah.
was afraid.
Yeah.
And that, but we got in trouble every night because we wanted to see the night sky, and, you know, they would walk you to your cabin and you're
Mhm.
supposed to stay there. And then we would go out to look at the stars. And a few times we got caught.
Oh, boy.
Okay, you're living dangerously.
That's right.
No, we didn't go far.
Oh, okay. Any other question from our live audience here in the classroom? Any
I'll tell another story if we have time.
Please, sure, we do. Go
Okay.
ahead, Bob.
We really like being in nature when we go, and that's why we stay in tents and do other things. We were in an area in the Serengeti where there's a lion pride very close by, and he woke up in the morning. You know, I heard this noise in front of our tent, a vehicle going back and forth, and I didn't know what the heck's going on, and so I knew enough not to open the tent, but. And I kind of looked out, and there was our guide. He was going back and forth, and he yelled out, "There's a lioness lying next to your tent." So, so we waited, okay, and he kept doing it. She wasn't moving. She didn't care. So finally, he just pulled up right next to the opening and said, "Jump in." Okay, so we did. We also have had situations. The Cape buffalo, you know, can be really vicious, and they're huge animals, and we had one in the middle of the night that was eating the grass right alongside our tent. And you could see his shape on the side of the tent, you know, bulging in where he was doing that. So pretty exciting. I mean, it's not, we didn't feel at all threatened in any of these cases, but pretty interesting nonetheless. There are places where you can do walking safaris. Have anybody done that? Okay. I mean, there are really two different categories. Most common is really they just take you relatively close to your lodge or tent where you're looking at the plants, maybe some of the small animals or what have you, very close to where you are. And those are pretty tame. And then in Zimbabwe and a few other places, they actually take you out in the wild. And you're going with somebody with a rifle, but you're out there approaching animals. And that's a very different perspective. We were in a place called Mana Falls, which is known for their wild dogs, you know, the painted dogs. And this, by the way, was in May. Okay. I didn't know that was the wrong time of year to go, but we went. And we had seen on TV, the BBC show on wild dogs, Sir Richard Attenborough, you know, the whole thing. And this is the camp where that thing was filmed. And in fact, our guide was on that film. So we thought, you know, we're really going to see the wild dogs. Not a chance. Nothing. Okay. Yes.
The other woman was saying the scariest thing she had was when wild dogs surrounded their truck.
Mhm.
And it was really scary. And the guy says, "We're out of here because those dogs will jump in and
Wow.
kill, you know, hurt somebody."
You know, I've
So,
never heard that, but I mean, I
yeah,
believe it. But,
she lived it. So
yeah, well, of course.
I
Yeah.
believe in it.
Yeah. I mean, in that area where we went, I mean, one of the things they do is they have you get down and be on the ground with them. So I don't know.
Bob, there's another comment or question in the chat box from our Zoom viewers. Any recommendations for safari country places, and how do you go about arranging it?
Okay. If this is a first safari, which I'm assuming it is, there's really three places, I guess, that I would sort of recommend. One would be South Africa. And that tends to be closer to civilization, more civilized, more developed. And South Africa, you also have Cape Town and some other wonderful things to see. There's wine country. There's other things to see besides safari. So if someone wants that kind of a mix, then that's a good place to go. The other two places would be Kenya or Tanzania. Tanzania, they have what they call the northern route, where you go, and there's a number of national parks that are relatively close. They can't see me, but anyway, I guess they can, I'm gonna think of it. But anyway, there's a number of national parks that are relatively close together. And so it's common that you would drive from place to place you would arrange it so you're with one guide pretty much through the whole trip, and they take you from one location to the next and to the next, where you're overnighting or spending your time. And so you see a lot of variety there with that. You have the Gorogoro Crater, you've got the Serengeti, you have Tarangire. So there's a lot of different places to go that have different animals, different topography. And because you're not flying, it tends to be a little bit less expensive. And then there's Kenya. And Kenya falls probably in between the two that I've just mentioned, in that it's a little bit more developed, although certainly in the wild, it's wild. But they have a better infrastructure maybe than Tanzania does. It's a little bit more prosperous country generally. And that can be done either just purely driving or flying, depending on how you arrange it and where you're going. There are lots of choices. I mean, one way is to use a group like OAT, which has been mentioned, and I haven't done it. I don't like to go with groups, but people have had very good experiences with them. I guess Rhodes Scholars also does one, and I'm sure there's others. The major companies that were mentioned here, Mankato, Curran Downey, A&K, they're all travel agents, but they have their own camps and everything, and they're pretty high end, and they can arrange any of those things. There are a number of travel companies that really focus on safaris. Most of them are in England. And I've booked a number of trips through a couple of those companies. And they tend to be at least mid-range, if not higher, for what they're targeting. And they can customize anything for you. And then there are the local operators. So they're the companies that are in those countries that are run by the locals. And some of them are big operations and very sophisticated, and some are mom and pop. So it just depends on what they're interested in. But we did our first with A&K. It was very high end. We spent a lot of extra money, frankly, that probably we shouldn't have. But it was a beautiful trip, and that was a South Africa trip. As I say, we did see Cape Town. We did see the wine country. There's a lot of other ancillary stuff there in South Africa. Excuse me. But if they want really to be focused on the safari experience, I would personally choose either Kenya or Tanzania, and maybe go to one of those British companies, and they can find them online. There are quite a few.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. Okay. Any other questions? No.
Oh,
Wait, one moment.
okay, the question was, what does OAT stand for?
Oh, what does OAT stand for?
I'm sorry?
Overseas Adventure Travel.
Overseas Adventure Travel.
OAT, Overseas Adventure Travel. Okay.
Okay.
Traveled with them all over the world, so this is not my first.
Not your first rodeo.
And if you just Google OAT, it'll still come up.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
They're probably together with Oat Bran and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
They make all the arrangements for you. Airfare and accommodations, and they're flexible about if you want to stop in the city on the way and all of that kind of stuff. So if you like that kind of thing, you just call them up and write a check.
They only do small groups.
And it's only 22 people.
16 people is what they take.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, well, it's
Okay.
now on the one that says 20.
Okay, well, we have some good resources right here in this room. Yeah, Margie? Wait,
No, I'm looking for John
Okay.
Wayne.
one at a time, Yeah.
I was just going to say, we did ours through a British company, and my daughter and I went, and we actually had, which we didn't realize when we set it up through them, we had our own private guide. And he went from Kilimanjaro, picked us up at the airport, took us to the hotel. And then, we went on safari with him, and we went to the crater, and he'd drop us off at where we had made arrangements to stay. And they had 3 different levels of pricing, so you could pick whichever one you wanted. And then he'd pick you up in the morning, and we drove all over the crater, and it was just us and him.
Mhm.
And it was amazing. And all the information, he could tell you everything and packed a lunch for us. And it was, and then the nice thing that we did, which wasn't flying, it was, less expensive, but we saw a lot.
Mhm.
And when we were driving through the towns, if we wanted to stop and see the baboons, or we wanted to stop at and get some food or buy something, we just stop.
Mhm.
And they, they tend to want to take it to the tourist places, but we'd be driving just outside the town, and we'd stop at a little place right off the side of the road and buy, sandals or whatever from them. And
Nice.
it worked out much nicer. We stopped at a Maasai village
Mhm.
and drove. The only thing is that, when you drive, the roads are not all paved, especially when you get to the Serengeti. So you have to be prepared for that. So if you have back issues, the roads are really rough, and that's not what you want to do. You want to fly, but you can't beat, like you said, you see a lot more, and you get to experience more of the adventure of being out in the wild. And we went to see the Great Migration.
Mhm.
So we looked to find out where the animals were at the time that we went, which was the end of May, beginning of June. And so one of the places that we stayed at one of the tent lodges was up on a hill, and you could see the migration of thousands of animals from up there going up this valley of zebras and wildebeest and giraffes. And at one point when we were driving, we had to stop because there were thousands of them crossing the
Mhm.
road, and you couldn't even go anywhere. And it was just amazing. I mean, you have to pinch yourself to remember that you're not in a zoo. It's crazy. But anyway, I would go that way myself. I wouldn't want to go with a big group. Like you said, it's different.
But by the way, just a general
you.
thing, if you are going to a camp or a lodge without your own driver, what typically happens is that camp provides the driver, the guide, and you're probably going to be paired up with other people. Maybe could be as many as 8, but more commonly 4 or 6 in a car. I prefer to be private, and you can do, if you're making arrangements, you can arrange for private vehicles. In Tanzania, that's very common. What you did is very common. That picture I showed of the guy whose house I'd been to and everything, that's what he does. So that's exactly, in northern Tanzania in particular, that's easy to do. It's a good way to go.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, then I want to thank Bob Greenberg for a marvelous presentation, excellent photography.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thanks, everybody.